All right, so welcome everybody. This is lesson 1.3 and today is our virtual lesson. So for you guys today, what I want you to make sure you understand is that there are going to be some breaks and some pauses within this video that I'm going to ask you guys questions for, and I need you to fill in. Now this is one where it's a simple lesson, but it's one that needs to get presented to you guys based on the fact of what's going to happen next year. And when you're in geometry, you're going to be doing things called proofs, which means you're going to start with an equation and then you're going to have an end. And what you have to do is prove all the way through down and how you get the answer, okay? And so that's kind of what the premise of it is identifying properties as we go through this setup. Okay, so first we're going to do is on here we have bell work, but we're not going to really focus on that. Instead, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to talk a little bit, and there's a lot of properties in this actual lesson today. And here they all are, okay? So if you have the notes or the ability to print them out, I would ask and recommend that you please do, okay? If you don't have the ability, that's okay. But just know this is what we're shooting for. You are going to have to know these properties, okay? So however you want to write these down, please write them down, okay? Because you're going to have to know the examples. The main thing I'd want you to understand is maybe not necessarily the words, but the symbols and how it reacts. For example, additive identity basically means if I add 0 to any side, it doesn't matter, it still equals A. That's an additive identity, okay? Additive inverse is if I take this number and then I add the opposite, which would be the negative. So for example, 3 plus a negative 3 is 0, okay? Negative 4 plus 4 is 0. How I always try to teach my students every year, guys, is that when you're going through this process, a negative number is you spending money and a positive is you receiving money, right? So I think in terms of finance, I teach my students this as we go throughout the year so that you can know you had $4, but then you spent $4, and guess what? Now you have what? 0 left, okay? It's a simple setup like that. Another thing you're gonna have to learn is, and know about, is the commutative property, okay? So here is the commutative property and then the associative. So commutative states, no matter what order you put these in, they are exactly the same. So 4 plus 8 equals 8 plus 4, right? And then over here, 7 times 11 equals 11 times 7. It doesn't matter how you switch them, it's the commutative property. Associative property is putting a wall and grouping things together, right? So here, an associative property would be 3 plus 5, you group those together, plus 7. Now, this does not change, okay? If I add these 3 together, it doesn't change no matter the grouping, right? So if I group the 5 plus 7, or if I group the 3 plus 5, guess what? It doesn't change how the process works, right? And then same here with multiplication, right? The associative property says no matter what, if I group these two together, because you guys know PEMDAS, right? Parentheses, exponents, multiplication, divide, add, subtract. If I have this, I'd multiply these together, I'd get 9, so on and so forth, okay? It doesn't really matter. So today's lesson, what it is identifying the properties as we move forward. So that's kind of what we're gonna do right now. And so the very first thing out the gate is just gonna write these properties down, right? So we have our first one here. This is the same and this is the same, and what are they doing? Okay, knowing on the things that we have above, this would be the commutative property. Make sure I spell it right. Commutative. All right, that's the commutative property. Now this one, y equals y plus 0. What does that represent? Okay, now I'm going to make it short since it's harder, but this is add. This would be the identity property. Right? No matter what you add, if you add 0 to it, it's going to be the same thing. Negative and a negative equals 0. You know this is additive inverse. All right, inverse is the opposite. That's kind of what that's the same definition of it. Okay, same thing up here. Now we have this. These are the same and this is the same, but what did they do? They just rearranged it. So again, this is the commutative property. All right, and then you look at this through here and you guys can see that this one right here is kind of the same similar. So this would be, again, identity, additive identity. It should put that in front. This would be add inverse, so on and so forth, right? If I do here, the same thing, okay? This is going to be identity property. This is going to be inverse, and this is going to be commutative, right? Nothing really changes, so I'm not going to write those 3 down. But now we get to the bottom 3 down here. Okay, now we've dealt with what identity property is. Identity is adding 0. What is the inverse? Adding the opposite. Okay, so we know that this is additive inverse. Now, if you want to write the whole thing down, you can. But what is this? Okay, this is the first time we ran into this. And if you look at the properties that I had you write down, or you look at the notes, if you have it set up on the side, you guys know that this would be the associative property. Okay, and then again, once again, if you add a 0, just that is identity. All right, additive identity. You should put add in front of it. Okay, so now what I want you guys to do is I want you to look at this setup, and you guys know that this would be inverse again, that would be additive, so it's not identity, excuse me, so you know it's nothing different, but once again you have the brackets, so this would be associative. So you guys should know what the difference is between associative property and what commutative is, right? Commutative is just rearranging the numbers even though they're the exact same thing. And associative is associating numbers together even though they're the exact same thing. So what I want you guys to do is, I'm going to pause this video in a second here, and I want you guys to give me the following answers, okay? I'm going to circle a couple of them here, and I want you to give me the answer. So what you're going to do is give me this one right here. All right, the video is going to freeze in a second. You're going to tell me exactly what that one is, and then you're also going to tell me what this one is right here. All right, and then last, I want to know exactly what, and let me think here. Give me this one right here. Tell me what those three things are. Okay, so hopefully you guys got it. As you go through, you answered them, and good luck on that. Okay, so if you don't remember what these are, because I'm not going to fill in the rest of these, this is associative property here. Okay, this one over here was the inverse, additive inverse. It would see, hopefully you guys wrote that down, and then the last one here is commutative property. Commutative. Okay, the rest you guys could have known, right? This is associative, that is identity, that is in the inverse property, that is commutative. It's actually pretty simple. It's just you guys need to know the properties as they associate. So that way when we test you on this, you guys will be able to figure these properties out pretty quick. All right, now we're going to add in some multiples. So we've had additive, now we have multiplication. So here's the multiplication or multiplicative identity. Love these words, right? Okay, which means if you multiply anything by 1, it's still the same number. So a times 1 equals a. Then you have the multiplicative property of 0, which means you multiply anything by 0, it is what? 0. And then you have the multiplicative inverse. Okay, so inverse basically means you have a over b, where b cannot be 0. Now, it says b cannot be 0 because if you ever have a 0 underneath on a fraction, it is a not real number or non-real number. Okay, so you can't have that. So what you want to know is that if you have a over b, well, the inverse of that would be b over a, also known as the reciprocal. We'll be doing a ton of that this year because I understand that you guys fear fractions. My job as your teacher is to make sure you don't fear them, okay? So understand what that is, okay? So if I tell you, here's 4/5, in order to make it 1, you would times it by 5 over 4, so then be 20 over 20 or 1, right? Simple enough in setup. So now we're going to identify these properties. Okay, so as we're going through here, here is multiplication. So this would be the oh man, I can't spell. Multiplicate, by the way, which is why after this I'll always write just multi, because I understand its struggles. All right, this is multiplicative identity. All right, and then if you have plus, now here's a plus, m plus, and a minus, now this is add, right? And then you want to know this is the additive inverse, so we're switching it up a little bit here. Now these are all the same things you're going to see on Alex for your homework, okay? Where it's going to shoot between multiplication and addition. And now here is, same thing, now here is multiplication, okay? But now we have to put one of the options that will come up, multiplicative, sorry I can't say that, association. All right, it's the multiplication association property, okay? Know that aspect. And then here, okay, now this is one we didn't actually cover and I didn't show you, but I want to make sure you understand. If you guys look at this, compared to here, hopefully you guys know this is the distributive property. Now this is one property we will show later. That will be on lesson 1.4. We're going to have a whole thing about distributive property because hopefully you guys can remember those things, okay? So the distributive property. So same thing up here, right? On this one up here, when you guys are looking at this one would be multiplication. And all they're doing is they're putting the brackets around it, so they're associating different things together. So make sure you guys know that. Same thing here. This would be multiplication, and we put it in here as what? This is the property of 0, okay? Because you have a property of 0. Now we have, addition again. So we know we would want to start with additive, or I'm just going to put ADD. And then what is this? This is the, when you guys are looking at it, you're just rearranging it, so it's commutative. And then the last one here, A times 1 over A equals 1. That is the multiplication inverse. All right, so what your goal is to be able to look at properties and say, okay, I know this is multiplication, but which one is it? Oh, it's the identity property. I know this is addition. Which one is it? Oh, it's the inverse property. I know what this is. This is called distributive when you show something like that. And then you know what this is right here, okay? This is multiplication inverse. It's very easy and kind of to understand, but what you guys need to understand is when you're looking at these from the originals, you need to learn them. These are the properties, okay? We are going to have a couple of these on the questions for Alex, and then they will be on the quiz as well, and eventually on the test. Now, we're not going to have very many, so what you do is you just have to understand what an identity property does. If you multiply by something by 0, that's probably the easiest one. And then what's the difference between an associative with a wall and then just, or brackets, and then a community, right? Which is just rearranging. Know those key terms, okay? Because like this one here, this is the 0 property. So I would know, I would write that 0 prop. I'm gonna go quick on these. This will be identity, or this would be the multiplication identity. Same thing here, this would be multiplication, and you're just rearranging stuff, right? So this is commutative, and then this would be addition, and you're putting different brackets around it, so it'd be addition, the associative property, okay? So please make sure you guys know that. So what I want you to cover real quick is I want you to answer a couple of these. I'm gonna pause the video again, you're gonna do it, all right? I wanna know what this property is right here. Actually, let me highlight these real quick, and I will use, I'll use L, okay? I wanna know what this property is right here. I also want to know what this property is right there. And then, ladies and gentlemen, the very last one would be this property right here. So pause the video and answer those. All right, the last thing I want to make sure you guys know is when you're moving through these, if you don't want to see what the rest of these are, I have my other video on YouTube. This is more of an introductory one for you guys. Okay, you know that this would be additive inverse because it's M and then minus, you add the negative, that'd be inverse. This would be multiplication, right? This would be multi, and then this is going to be the associative property. This one here is distributive. So hopefully on the stop, you put distributive property, right? And then you have another one here where you have, this is gonna be addition, right? But all you're doing is changing the brackets around. So it's the addition of associative. And then you have your multiplication commutative because it's not changing it, you're just rearranging it. You're not putting brackets around it. This one right here, I wanted to make sure you guys know, was the multi what? Identity property. And then this one would be the property of 0, simple enough. Now this one here would be additive, okay? Additive identity, remember you add 0 to any number and it stays the same. This one right here, you're just rearranging it again. This is commutative. And then this one is the multi. Let me bring this down, because that's gonna be weird, right? And this is the what? Inverse. Okay, it's the inverse function. And then the last one, of course, is distributive. So there's a big key reality that I need to make sure you guys know these properties as we go forward. Do the homework. It's not very many. It's going to be on the back end of 1.2. So if you went through lesson 1.2 and then you're struggling to finish 1.2, it's because at the end of that lesson is this homework. So please make sure you go in there and you tag onto these last 6 questions. or how many we put on there. We have the questions built. I just can't remember how many we did. If you have any problems, reach out to me. But good luck, ladies and gentlemen. I know you will be successful on this lesson.